Well, guys, first of all, thanks for coming in and spending your time with me, and then sitting in LA traffic to get to here to chat about lifeguarding. But
it's our pleasure.
It's something we've all done before, but I wanted to get like a formal recording and hopefully get some stories out and some concepts and things so people can listen to it and learn from two legends. And I will use that word, even though I know you guys maybe don't want me to. But you guys have both been doing the profession for a super long time and have a perspective that's unique. And then Mike, you've written 2 books about it too, so you've thought about it for some time as well.
Absolutely.
So first of all, thank you, and we'll start off by saying it's a great day
to be a state lifeguard.
There we go. So let's just start off with just a simple intro. What year did you start lifeguarding? Kind of what got you into it, and then maybe also just how long you did, because you guys are both instructors at lifeguard training. So we'll start with that, and I guess Mestri, we'll just start with you first, and we'll go over. So
sure. I started guarding in 1971, and growing up in Leucadia, where we used to vacation, across the street there was 2 state guards that were like my mentors. They taught me how to surf, and I mean, they knew me from the time I was 4 years old, and how to surf, how to dive. Taught me a lot about passion for the ocean and that kind of thing. And basically, I really didn't think about lifeguarding until they just called up and said, okay, be here, South Carlsbad on this date and this time. And okay, because anything they told me to do, I did. And I'm, back in those days, the swim tests were quite different. I think there was probably close to 250 people at the swim that day, and all American swimmers. But somehow I got through it. And so I started in 71 down in North San Diego County. Spent my whole career working there. And I had a 10-year career as a seasonal lifeguard. A couple of key moments for me was my rookie year. They called me out of the field. The aquatic specialist, Bob Eisner, called me out, I thought, to get fired. And basically wanted me to get into, they were just starting the junior lifeguard program that year, and wanted me to come back my second year and get involved with the junior guard program with the intent of taking over from Mike Bray and Dennis Garahy, who were starting the program. So that was a big thing, because I never thought about teaching, and junior guards opened up a world to me that I didn't know was available to me, and still worked the field a lot. And then the other big thing was in 1978, I got a call from Brian Hickey and asking me if I wanted to come and help at lifeguard training. And that was a real game changer for me. I got involved, at the low level of lifeguard training, which was always CPR, as Bruiser remembers. And that was 1978. And by 1980, the people that were above me had moved on to other positions, and I got handed control of the lifeguard training program about 1980, I believe it was, and supervised, coordinated the lifeguard training program from that point until I retired in 2007. And that, again, continued to send me down the path of specifically training within the department. Became a permanent in 1981 until 2007. Most of that was as a lifeguard supervisor, state park peace officer, again in San Diego Coast, and eventually also got involved with the statewide emergency medical services programs. We didn't have much. We used to rely on the American Red Cross, and their program got to where it just didn't fit our needs anymore. So we were able to start our own emergency medical responder program, and then out of that grew the EMT program. And so I think it was about 95, somewhere in there, I kind of forced my way into that program, and within a couple of years kind of got handed the keys to the statewide EMS program. So my career, while field-oriented, my side job, so to speak, was always involved with lifeguard training and all of the EMS training statewide.
Yeah, and just for people who are listening, let's say, and I don't know, you said you retired in 2007, but as far as field work, peace officer work, correct? Because now you're still, I mean, you've been from 2010 when I went through.
Yeah.
You're very much still involved with training.
Yeah.
So I just want to make that discrepancy there. So as far as training goes, you've been doing it for coming up on, what, 45 years now? If my math
This is my
correct?
44th year
44th year
lifeguard training.
Of
In
instructing
2007,
lifeguards.
I immediately got rehired. They called it a retired annuitant
Yeah.
position, and continued to assist with lifeguard training and EMT and EMR. And somehow they still are using me.
Yeah. And we'll be there doing that tomorrow.
Yeah,
So,
again
yeah.
at it tomorrow, and it's always been the focus of my entire year's lifeguard training. Junior guards was an incredible experience. I had probably in some ways the most fun I ever had lifeguarding was just with junior guards. But my pure passion was showing up at Huntington State Beach every year with Mike and other people to do the lifeguard training program, because you're getting the entry level. You're getting a clean slate, and imparting to them all of the important stuff of the state lifeguard history and the educational aspects. So yeah, I still get a kick of it. I was joking with Mike driving up here today, as long as I don't look in a mirror on a daily basis when I'm around you guys, I still feel pretty young until at night when the day's done, and then being on my feet for 10 or 12 hours. That's what I feel most is the long days, but the energy level is still there. It
definitely
fun.
is. I can speak firsthand on that, seeing you there still with us. So
yeah. So it's been a great ride.
Nice. And Bruiser, let's go with you then. The year you started, and then kind of when you got involved with training, and then retirement as well.
Well, before I start, let me just say that what he's done is incredible. Being in charge of training essentially for 44 years, he's trained probably 5,000 lifeguards over the years, and it's amazing. I don't have the energy for that. I envy what he does, but I don't have the energy. But anyway, I started lifeguarding in 1970, and I grew up in Long Beach, and being a lifeguard was a rite of passage. Long Beach was a big aquatics city at that time, water polo and swimming, and so in 1970, my water polo coach was a state lifeguard, and he let us know if we tried out for any other agency but the state, our courage factor was a little suspect, and so I tried out and made it. And I went through the training, and I wanted to work at Huntington because all my buddies were working at Huntington, but I didn't score high enough in the training, and I was bitterly disappointed. So all my buddies were going to work there, and so I got my second choice, which was San Clemente. And as soon as I got down there, I'm like, God, the surf was amazing, the town was amazing. It's a great place to live. I've been there for 50 years, and so. I worked as a seasonal guard for some years. 77, I took the peace officer training and became a full-time lifeguard. I started doing lifeguard training in 83. And I worked the field, on the front lines until the early 2000s. And as my skills started to erode, I promoted. But in the meantime, I was the lifeguard union president for 7 years. Did a lot of trips to Sacramento. I became a rescue boat operator in 1989, a position which that was the best thing ever. So in 2001, like I said, I promoted. I became the lifeguard chief at Huntington and Bolsa Chica State Beaches, and I did that for 4 years, and then I finished my career as the lifeguard chief at San Clemente and Doheny and San Onofre. And I worked as a retired annuitant for 7 years. I was mainly I was an event coordinator. But my last year, I got to be a lifeguard chief again. That was so cool. Terry Murphy retired, and they needed somebody to fill that one summer. And so I did it. And it was great because I was over all my ego and all that stuff. And you know, I told the guys when I came in, I trust you guys. You know the operation better than I do. You know, just keep it between the lines. And I think we all we did a good job and we had a good time. So, and I retired in 2014, and then I wrote a couple of books about lifeguarding, which took a long time. So that's about it.
You know, there is one other thing that kind of hooks us at the hip. A couple things. In '81, and I'd been trying to become a permanent for quite a few years. I'd taken the test 2 or 3 times, didn't interview well. I didn't even get hired out of lifeguard training. I scored low enough where the position that I was going to get closed, and I had to go beg for a job, and somehow got in there. But fast forward to when the permanent job came open in '81, Mike was already a badged peace officer, a PI at San Clemente, and it was his position. I mean, all he had to do was lateral down, and it was a full-time permanent lifeguard. And you know, to speak to the kind of code lifeguards had back then, the gentleman he knew that's where I was from. That's where I spent my whole career. That's where I was going to live, raise my kids, all that kind of stuff. Stepped aside and let me get my permanent job there. And then within a couple of years, I think you got the full-time permanent. So it all worked out for both of us. But,
Nice.
And then we worked a lot together over our careers. We did something really unique in 2007. We had a triple retirement function with Denny Stouffer, who was the longtime lifeguard Soup 2 at the San Diego Coast District, and Mike and myself.
We all retired at the same time.
Yeah, and that was probably won't see the likes of that again. And we had the Torrey Pines retirement party up in the Pines, which was very special. And
our old friend Ed Vidroska organized it.
Yeah.
And it nearly killed him.
Nice. So between the two of you guys sitting in this room, there's, I mean, between, and Mestri, you're still putting in time at training and stuff, and Bruiser, you can't stay away from the training room either, even though you're not directly in the classroom with us.
That's
You're still hanging out and dispelling wisdom on the passing by of seasonals and
I
stuff.
try to keep a low profile.
But there's, what we're hovering around 100 years of lifeguard experience in this room.
Yeah.
Speaking of the two of you guys there. So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is. It's unique and kind of very unique, I think, to the state lifeguard service. A lot of the agents, like I was talking to the LA County training coordinator for their EMS program up there, and it's been this way for decades. They are only allowed to stay in a certain position for 2 years, and then they got to go back in the field. Like they can go into admin for a while, then they go back to the field. They can go into training, they go back in the field. And we were allowed, once we chose our path, like for us in training, and Mike worked his way up the ladder, to do that for a really long period of time. And that was pretty unique, I think, to the state lifeguard service.
Yeah.
And, I appreciate that. And I got to do everything. I was... ran the defensive tactics program and the scuba search and rescue program. Mike got to do the boat. We didn't have boats, but he got to do the boats. So pretty exciting, and probably what kept a lot of my interest level so high throughout the entire career was anytime you're in training, you're always it's something new every time you go to teach. So it's pretty fun.
Training was, when we did it, it was a lot less structured than it is now. And like we would we all had campers or something, and we would pull them in at Huntington when the training started, and we'd just set them up. In fact, we would at the end we would just drop our campers there and leave them there for a couple of months, and afterwards, we'd hang out and drink beer and stuff. I mean, it was long days. We had to be out and ready to run at 7, and we usually went till 6:30 or 7 at night. So it was hard work, but. It just wasn't nearly as formal then as it is now. And it was just as demanding, I think. But, it was a good training. But what they're doing now is really impressive, what you guys are doing.
Yeah. Real quick, just to back it up a little bit, let's just describe for if someone's listening to this that has no idea what's going on. Describe, if you're going to describe to a layman person, the state park peace officer position, lifeguard, and how that works. Someone who knows nothing about it.
Well, it was decided in the early 70s, it was decided that the rangers needed to be peace officers because there are all these things going on in the parks, and a lot of times the adjacent police didn't want to respond into a separate jurisdiction. So they started training rangers to be peace officers. And our, for better or worse, our chief at that time, Bob Eisner, decided that if the lifeguards didn't get on that wagon, we were going to be left behind in many ways, including, in terms of benefits and pay and all that. So we started going to the Peace Officer Academy in 72 or 73. And so, I think it's fair to say that all of us in the 70s and throughout much of the 80s, we didn't do a whole lot of law enforcement because there were a lot of rangers around then. So we carried our guns in bowling ball bags. And most of us, I think, weren't real comfortable writing tickets and all that. But if something really bad happened, we'd strap our guns on over our reds and run in there and deal with it. But that changed in the mid '80s in Huntington. They got a crew of young lions in there that really were into law enforcement, and they started doing that to the exclusion of the aquatic stuff. So as years went on, like by the 90s at San Clemente, we were doing a lot more enforcement. And God, when I got to Huntington to be the chief there, I was like, holy crap, man! All these guys do is law enforcement, and they work the night shift, and the rescue work was mostly left to the seasonal staff. So it's been it's been a difficult mix. It's really hard to do two things and excel at both of them. And so, my observation is, the guys that choose to do law enforcement are really good at that, but, maybe not quite as good at the aquatics, and vice versa. So, it's an uncomfortable relationship. Does it work? Yeah, kind of. Is it effective? Yeah, kind of. The thing I see about it is that, a lot of guys let their aquatic skills just slip, and that's not a good thing for a lifeguard. So...
Yeah, I mean, especially back in the 70s, none of us got into lifeguarding to be a peace officer. I think now everybody knows when they're signing up because we make it very, very clear to them.
Almost everybody.
Almost everybody, yeah. I know I do backgrounds now. I know out of backgrounds we make it abundantly clear that you're going to be a peace officer. In other words, you're going to be a cop. And, not that you ignore your aquatic duties, but you're going to put all your gear on every day, and that's going to be your primary role. And if you absolutely need to, then you lock everything up and you go in the water. Like Mike was saying, I mean, for at least the early days, in the 80s, we still showed up, got in our reds, went on patrol, and the gun got put away. It only came out when we needed it. But by the 90s, somewhere in there, it became the mandate that no, when you get to work, you put all of your gear on, and you're primarily a peace officer first. And if you need to, we have seasonals to do the aquatic stuff. If you need to back them up, you back them up. But it certainly, I think, it weighed on my mind many times. I just going, God, I didn't sign up for. I didn't want to do this. But I wanted the job so bad, the permanent job, that I think what saved it was Mike alluded to the fact that it just wasn't out of control with enforcement until more toward the end. And toward the end of my career, I started getting into it a little bit more and more. And, I didn't enjoy that aspect of it. It's because it is two different skill sets that's so different. As a lifeguard, aquatic-oriented lifeguard, you're there to have the public enjoy their experience, basically reinforcing positive stuff for the most part. And the peace officer job, usually when you're talking to somebody, it's the other end of the spectrum. You can't park here, your dog's got to be on a leash, citations start, wrestling matches start, and that kind of thing. I think one thing that really changed it, like at Huntington, where it really is where it all blossomed or blew up, depending on how you look at it,
Right.
was that they didn't have enough space. We needed more bodies and couldn't get enough people through the Mott Training Center up in Monterey. So they put a whole group, I think, of about a dozen lifeguards through the local sheriff's academy. So they were taught by sheriffs, street cops. And so their mentality coming out of that was entirely different. And that's kind of when that big change, and we had some people go through San Diego County sheriffs, and then a few more went through Riverside, and all of a sudden we had that mix of, and it was kind of clashed for a while of just, no, I'm a cop. I just happen to be a lifeguard.
Yeah.
And some of us going, no, it says lifeguard on the patch. That was one of the big arguments that Denny Stouffer fought for really, really hard. They wanted to make just a state patch for everybody. And no, we're going to have the lifeguard rocker. And he didn't give up our identity. So to this day, we still have lifeguard, and need to remind that we're lifeguards first, and we just have we have a very difficult job of handling both of them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. They're two separate disciplines, and they're both very complicated. And I tried to thread the needle for a few years, and you'd be driving down the beach, and okay, here's this guy doing the same thing I told him not to do yesterday. So you're in the patrol car, and you got to get out of the patrol car and take 15 minutes to write the ticket, and he's giving you all this crap, and your shotgun's looking around like, we got to keep moving, man. This is, we can't do this. So it's a tough one. It's a really tough one. And they're, like I said, they're both really complicated skills, and you can't do one without compromising the other. That's
Well, it's effectively two positions in one, right? And you got to strip.
Yeah.
Nowadays, the bulletproof vest, the gun belt,
Yes,
everything down to your reds, your red trunks, and then make a rescue, and then you come back. You got to lock. The gun's got to be locked away, et cetera, and then you got to go right back to drying off, putting all that stuff on. Now you go pull someone over for a DUI. How did you guys find balance?
For me, I still felt like I was basically a lifeguard in reds, and when I needed to, I would strap it on and do that part of the job, and that wasn't as much. The tougher aspect when it was, you will put all your gear on, and that's how you start every day. It was a whole different mental aspect to it. And I know for me, I remember Jeff Bruck and Miles Lundquist went through the San Diego County Sheriff's Academy, and they came out all fired up and attacking the enforcement, and I'm going, okay. And for, I don't know, a couple months I went at it, and I just started writing tickets like right and left for everything under the sun. And then I don't know, it just hit me one day. I'm going, what am I doing? This is not what I need to be doing. And it didn't change. I still had to show up with all the gear, but I went back into being more, I wanted to get up in the tower, visit the guards in the tower, be on the beach as much as I could, which at times for me was really difficult because I had all the EMS lifeguard training stuff. I was, writing the lesson plans, and there was always a ton of work to do with that. But I just made myself, I said, no, I'm going to try, and no matter what beach, I'm going to visit every seasonal at least once today, get back into that mode of looking at the water and still dealing with the knuckleheads that were out there when I had to, but refocusing a little bit more on aquatics and trying to enjoy the job a little bit more, because it got to us going, I'm not having any fun, and I'm not really doing any good. I'm writing parking tickets and dog tickets. I'm not changing the world really. I said, we got a couple guys that the nice thing, honestly, I think Mike would agree with this. There's always a few officers in your operation. That's all they want to do. They want to show up. They want to go out and do enforcement for 8 or 10 hours. They don't want to do training. They don't want to be a dog handler. They don't want to be a frontline lifeguard. They want to go out and do enforcement. And I used to bless those guys. Thank goodness, because you allow me to be able to go to Mott and teach, to be able to go to Huntington and teach, and keep that aspect going. So the balance was really difficult at times. Mostly it was, I just had to change my mindset of what I wanted the priority to be for me so that I could be the best version of myself. And I always thought, like, for me as an officer, my best tool was my voice and being able to calm things down and just get compliance, and then everybody's happy, versus working with a couple of the guys that no matter what they went into, it was going to go through the roof, right, and people were going to leave really mad, which I didn't want anybody to leave in parks mad. It's hard enough in this job, you know. You want people feeling like they had a good experience, they had a good time. And if they crossed the line, did something wrong, that somebody talked to them in a rational way of, you know, okay, you know, if they had a good reason for what they did, like they just didn't know, they're not from the area, I'm not getting out the ticket book. I'm just going to educate them. If it was somebody I dealt with again and again, like Mike said, then I'd have no problem. And if it upset them, I didn't care, because I wasn't going to convince them to come and have a good time at state parks with the state lifeguards. We all dealt with too many people like that just had it. They were never going to like what we did, whether it was a surfing area, a dog rule, a fire rule. We weren't going to win anyway. So.
Yeah, I balanced it by, you know, first of all, at San Clemente, we resisted it because we had an older crew that had managed to gain the respect of our managers. And so they kind of let us do our thing. So we didn't, you know, when I left at San Clemente in 2001, we were still just kind of doing that same thing. We were a lot quicker to put our guns on, but we weren't showing up with our guns on for our shifts. I was still riding in the Jeeps until I left. And so, you know, we resisted it. We did the stuff we had to do. And like Mike said, the law enforcement got to be more of a factor as time went on. But when I went to Huntington, everybody was, you know, all of the permanents were wearing guns. And I mean, they showed up, put their guns on, and that's what they did all day. And they did make a rescue once in a blue moon, but not too often. They were law enforcement officers. And there was a lot of law enforcement up there. And so, and the San Clemente guys had a reputation as, well, they don't do law enforcement. So I felt a little bit obligated to show them that, no, you know, we're capable of doing the law enforcement. So I made that, you know, I tried to work both ends. I did as much of the aquatic stuff as I could, but I was mostly a law enforcement officer up there. And, you know, I worked out every day, and I got in the water, you know, most days. And so the crew would see me, the chief, doing that, and they go, okay, this is still an important thing. And when I got back to San Clemente, they were having to wear their guns too. But the way it was set up, you know, I came in to San Clemente and I wanted my guys, my permanents, still supervising the beach and, you know, actively making rescues, because that's the culture there. And so I decided I'd get out there and do as much law enforcement as I could, you know, in their stead. So I would walk the beaches, and I wrote quite a few tickets. Kind of an interesting deal. You know, San Clemente is a small town, and so, you know, you find that you're, you know, writing tickets to people you're acquainted with, or you know, you're writing a ticket to a kid whose parents you know, or things like that. So I would kind of hedge the bets. You know, if I caught a kid that was doing something, he was falling down drunk, which happened quite often. Instead of writing him a ticket, I'd call his parents and have them come pick the kid up. And they were surprisingly rarely happy that I'd called them. And you know, sometimes I'd catch kids doing other things, and, you know, surfing into the swimming area repeatedly and flipping the lifeguards off. And so I'd write them a ticket, and I'd say, you know, you have your parents contact me, and, you know, I'll rip the ticket up. They didn't do a great deal of inventory on our tickets, so I could get away with that. But yeah, the law enforcement was, you know, it was at least as stressful as being a lifeguard in the field. I mean, you know, just people are yelling at you, and like Mike says, sometimes you gotta go to hands, and it's not a fun job, to be sure. So I think all of us, from our generation did what we had to do to balance the thing out.
The one thing that's different now is, I mean, my academy, well, I'm sure yours was the same. My academy was 7 weeks long, and at least a week of that was interpretation. I think it was 6 weeks of, and there was no post peace officer standards for training then. It was just they did what they did. So it was 6 weeks, and it wasn't even. I went 3 weeks and went home for vacation and came back for 3 weeks, and they gave you a badge. And he referred to it earlier. We got our gun, our Pope gear, peace officer protective equipment in a bowling bag. That's where it was at back then. These guys coming out now get 9 months of training. When I got done, I wasn't a peace officer. They gave me a gun and a badge, but I didn't really know that much. And there was no field training. You just, here's the keys, go back to what you did, except now you got a gun. Wonderful. These guys coming out now are just so well trained, and plus they have I think it's 14-week field training program where they're never by themselves for 14 weeks, and somebody's checking off the list of everything you need to do to get your final certification and pass probation. I mean, by the time they're done with that 14 weeks, they're either have moved on. They don't have the tools to go from the academy and put it out in the street, which is very rare. Or they're ready. They're so ready for everything, and their whole attitude's different. I know. I doing the backgrounds on the seasonals, that I trained and watched them in the field, and then go through the academy, and their mindset is they're so ready. They want to go out and do the enforcement and get that under their belt and establish themselves. Yeah. And then they want to think about, okay, now what do I want to do with my career? But they're so much better prepared, and the whole mindset's so different now, which is good for them because it's not a nice world. I mean, state parks, is beautiful as it is, and most people come to have a good time. The homeless issue is huge. Crime issue is huge. Yeah. Drinking and drugs is huge. Just an overall, especially in local communities, smaller communities like Carlsbad, and you get that local, state beach locals that are nothing but want to be a pain in our side. Yeah. And I'll agree with Mike of the several times I called parents to come pick their kids up and their surfboards. Across the board, they were in my face, who are you, instead of turning to Johnny and saying, if you ever, for what would have happened to me, my parents would have taken that surfboard, and I don't know if I would have ever seen it again. Yeah. So different times, different societies, very, very different than what we had in 1970, and nowadays. That's what's been unique to watch, is the evolution of lifeguarding, and if anything, it's just gotten more and more complicated for the field lifeguards. And you were mentioning on our drive up, here we are throwing 16-year-old kids with 8 days of training out there and dealing with what society's throwing at them right now. It's intense. And not even to mention for law enforcement, the climate that is just, that's a whole different issue. Absolutely. But you reminded me on next question I was going to kind of ask. Yeah, so tell me about what was lifeguarding like, as a seasonal back in the 70s, because to most lifeguards that was like to the untrained eye, right, a glory days kind of deal. So touch base on what it was like in the 70s when you guys started out, seasonals, that kind of thing, and then we can digress into how that's changed and kind of socially or with society and that kind of stuff. Well, I don't know what it was like at San Diego. I have a feeling it was similar, but when I first showed up, it was a lot less formal. We wore uniforms, but nobody was really holding your feet to the fire if your patch was falling off or something. But we stuck to the basics. We made the rescues. We took a lot of pride in our rescue work. We patrolled the beaches. We enforced the rules surprisingly stringently. But we had a good time while we were doing it, and we partied a lot after hours and all that. And so,
it was just a lot more. It was a lot less formal than it is now. You know, I mean, you showed up on time, you took care of business, and you know, hey, if you hadn't washed your uniform for a week, nobody really cared. You know, so and the chain of command was strictly adhered to, and I mean the mentors and the older guys on our beach. You know, I'm sure it was probably the same with San Diego. It was like when they showed up, it was, you know, I mean, you really admired those guys, even though they were only 25 or 26.
Yeah, I think pretty similar. I think a lot more. One of the things that's changed a lot, and I don't want to digress, but the guards back then used to work for a lot longer. Right? I mean, when I entered, I'd say the average was 8 to 10 years, and that's where there was some incredibly strong, I mean, just classic lifeguards, pure lifeguards in a way, because that was their only mission, and so it was a looser society. And I agree with Mike. I mean, the one thing that back then, man, everything was competitive. You know, we were competitive each other with the buoy swims. We were competitive about who's going to make the most rescues and tallies. And when we did cliff rescue, we were competitive of who's going to run up, you know, the grade at Torrey Pines with the metal spikes. I mean, everything was a competition. Because we were talking about this earlier, almost all the guards back in those days were competitive athletes in multiple sports, not just one, and a heck of a lot of all-American quality, Olympic quality. I know I worked with 2 or 3 Olympians just my first couple of years. I mean, it blew me away, and so it was, and out of that, I think it was just flat out fun. Lifeguarding was at an energy level. We all, for 3 months out of the year, everybody camped together at the campgrounds.
Yep.
Everybody surfed together in the mornings. We partied way too hard back in the day, for sure. There's no faking that. But everybody got up in the morning and went to work, and it was just pure joy. My first day of lifeguarding, I'll never forget. It's just, you know, like I said, I didn't get hired right away. And I begged the boss to hire me, and the Rutherford brothers were still working, and they probably told, go ahead and pick him up. He's a good kid. He's just dumb. You know, so we'll work through it, you know. And so they put me in the vehicle with Brian Hickey at Tamarack the first day on a busy weekend, July weekend. It's like, you know, 3, 4, 5 foot surf. And I made 12 rescues my first day. And it's like my whole world was shattered in such a positive way. I mean, I'd never felt such elation and energy, and you know, that I started when I opened my eyes up, realized everybody I was working with worked with. I won't say everybody. I'll take that back. There was a few guys. You know, what are you doing this job for?
Yeah.
Because 99% of us look around, and everybody's got their eyes open, and it's fired up, and they're making rescues. And at the end of the day, they're comparing rescues and where are we going to go eat and where are we surfing tomorrow. We talk about it at lifeguard training. Lifeguarding is a lifestyle, and I think it's less that nowadays. Back then, it was truly a lifestyle. I mean,
absolutely.
And the more years you worked, the more you got hooked. Then it wasn't just you worked for 3 or 4 or 5 months. Then next thing you know, you're traveling to Baja for 3 months, or you know, all over the world for many of the guards, and spending all of your spare time. And you know, we grew up in an era where we're all at each other's weddings and watching our kids be born, and now we're at an age where we're going to each other's celebrations of life, which is crazy. And that all is from the 70s and 80s of that energy level. And I still think lifeguarding for these kids is still that way in a sense, but society is just so different that it's tough to reach in and pull that out of them to where they're just drooling to be at work and fired up, and making them realize that heck, if you make one rescue today, that might change somebody's entire family or community for the rest of their life if it was a true. Now, granted, most of our rescues aren't out and out.
Life
they
and
wouldn't
death,
make it
always,
in.
Yeah.
But you know when you make those rescues
Yep.
that, wow, and if you think how heavy that is, if that person didn't go home, it's not just they're not going on with life and doing what they may have done in science or teaching or whatever. It's all their entire family and their communities impacted. So it's really getting people to realize that core of how cool lifeguarding is because of that. And I don't know, that was just effervescent back in the 70s. It was just overflowing in everything we did.
Yeah, we had a sense of community. It's kind of the same now, I think, in a lot of ways, but we had a huge sense of community because we all came from similar backgrounds. And, a lot of us lived in our vans in the parking lot there at the state park. And so, we would eat together and drink together at night. And we had our lifeguard shop, and we would hang out in the shop at night. And that was our place to, talk and
if you think
commiserate.
What job in the world do you camp and sleep at night with all the people that you're working with?
That's right.
For months on end, and that was a kind of a bummer when they started eliminating that.
Yeah.
Because that used to be like, at one point, I think Santa Leo had maybe 12 or 18 guards every night down there camping. South Carlsbad had people.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think? So starting when you guys did in the 70s and being involved with training for a significant amount of time and seeing the new generations coming through, every year there's a slight change and stuff. What do you think the change has been from then till now, and why do you think, what do you think is responsible for that, and what have we seen that's changed through that?
Well, it's been a slow change over the years, but over the last, let's just say 10 years, the candidates are not as strong overall, not as many, and we still have the top end that are incredible athletes, but we have a bigger middle group that's just not as physically talented. And I think that goes back to, like I said, almost everybody in the 70s or 80s was multi-sport personnel. We surfed, we dove, we I don't know, I was in the surf probably when I was 4 years old, learning to body surf from my dad. And then by the time I'm 6, I'm learning how to surf from the Rutherfords. And almost all the guards back then can fall back on that, and that's not necessarily the case now. So it's a little bit of, it's like what we see in professional athletes. Everybody's specialized. I am a 100 sprinter. That's what I do. When I swam, holy mackerel. I swam everything from, I didn't do the 50. They said, okay, yeah, Mestri, you're not going to be doing that one. But anything from 200 yards up, because nobody else would do it, all the way up to a mile, that's what I swam. And, you don't see that as much nowadays.
Right.
So it's a little bit, it's not their fault, it's just the way in society.
Yeah.
And then kids nowadays especially are just not as active. And that's a societal thing. There was no television and cell phones and all that. What did you do when we were our age? Your mom kicked you out of the house. Don't come back till dinner. So you were riding your bike for 8 or 10 miles or running around in the hills or just doing any number of things, but it was all physical and it was all out moving around. So I think in a way more coordinated too, because you were always climbing trees and multitasking and running from somebody for doing something, that kind of thing. They're brilliant now. The kids now are really sharp. It's just in a way different way. I think we were more nuts and bolts. Back in the 70s, everybody worked on their own cars.
That's right.
Repaired their own surfboards. That ain't happening nowadays. I know doing training, I don't know if Mike saw this. I think you must have seen some of it, but certainly over the past few years, the one thing I'm seeing is our society has become so much of a reward society. My child is, child of the day, student of the month. Down in Carlsbad this week, there's like all kinds of signs out for 5th grade graduation, 8th grade graduation, high school graduation was great. But go, that means you're old enough.
Work.
Go,
Yeah,
do
go
something.
do something.
Go to college or get a job. So entitled's not the right word. They're not used to, lifeguard training is still in your face. There's yelling and screaming going on because we got 8 days to get your attention to get this fixed. And a lot of the kids have never been yelled at in a negative way. And it's not, we're not being negative. We tell them that up front. It's all, we need to get your attention. We only have so much time. And if you think we're tough, wait until you go out and have the public talk to you, because they will rip your lips off. A big conversation I had just last weekend with a whole group of kids was to come out of your shell. You're really nice kids. You're really smart. I can tell. You're doing this stuff. You're too quiet. And if you do that out in the field, the public will run all over you. So, I always tell the story of, like, I'm a nice, mellow guy, at home and with my friends. But as soon as the Reds go on, it's like super Mestri, and I find my voice. And, that's kind of what I was trying to get across to the kids is, like, do yourself a favor, find your voice while you're here, and start yelling and screaming and be uncomfortable. That's okay. But experiment with it here so that by the time you get out to the field and you start telling somebody to put your dog on a leash, you actually have some command presence, and they'll look at you and go, oh, okay. Because if you go put your dog on a leash, then it won't be pretty.
Yeah,
so there's so many moving parts. I could talk, especially having done 40 years of training. I could talk for days about the change in candidates, but I think, in a nutshell, they're not as worldly experienced, athletically experienced. They're more smart in so many ways than we ever were. But they have a tough time putting just nuts and bolts together, because lifeguarding really is, while it's not a complicated thing. It's because it's all right for ocean lifeguards. It's right there in front of us. You have to know when to react and how to do it and all that kind of stuff. But it's really not rocket science, so to speak. And some of these kids think at rocket science with their thumb levels. It's just really different.
Yeah, the specialization has been huge. I mean, when we were growing up, and I don't want to be, that guy that's, when we were kids,
it's all right.
Walked to school.
That's what we're here for.
Walked to school and back to the snow every day. But, when we were kids, we played baseball, we played football, we played basketball, we ran, we did all these things competitively, swam, played water polo. And now the kids, not all of them, but a lot of the kids they have one sport and that's what they do, water polo or swimming and I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think on balance, our generation were perhaps better overall athletes. It just the whole thing with computers and, our generation, I think it's fair to say, was a little more adventurous than this. We traveled a lot. I mean, when I think of some of the things that I did or my friends did traveling, hitchhiking and sleeping in vacant lots and, while you're on the road and, just, going to foreign countries and being in really bizarre situations. I don't see that happening as much these days. And, the world our world has just gotten a lot stricter and a lot more confining, and so it manifests itself in our offspring. To me, the biggest thing is just the computer deal. The computers are so. Our parents wouldn't let us watch TV, like Mike said. They wouldn't let us watch TV all day, and So now the computer is not only an entertainment thing, but it's how you do your business and, you know, how you communicate with people. And so, you know, with my own kids, you know, I want to say that I see detriments, but honestly, as they've grown up, I don't really see detriments. It's you know, my son's one of my sons who was on the computer constantly, and we had to drag him out of his room. Well, he makes his living in that field now, so I guess in the end it paid off. So, you know, I try to keep an open mind about that. You know, I think it's important to be outside and all that sort of thing. But yeah, see, I've missed the last 20 years of you know, training. But you know, the thing I liked about being involved with lifeguarding, like that last year I worked as the lifeguard chief at San Clemente, you know, there are all these young kids that are 16, 17, 18, and you're watching them and like they do business differently, you know, and so it's to us, the older generation, to try and understand how and why they're doing things, because they're still performing the rescues, they're still doing great jobs on first aids and all that. So I guess that's the bottom line.
The communication skills. That's another thing we were talking about last weekend. Is everybody was talking and going, yeah, because people don't talk anymore. They communicate with their phones,
That's
even
right,
when they're
yeah.
in the same room.
Yep.
So we're going to, are any of these kids looking you in the eye? You know, just little things. And, you know, again, when you go to talk to people, you can't talk like this. You've got to look them in the eye and talk to them as a person. And that'll be really uncomfortable for a while, you know. So that's, communication skills are way, way different than they used to be. And one thing you mentioned, you know, I think they're about why we're not keeping them for 10 or 15 years. I mean, bottom line is pay. That when I started, I think I made $274 an hour, and I was like on top of the world. That was like none of my friends were even coming close to making that money.
What was the minimum wage at that time? Because it was above.
It was
right?
$1.25 or something.
Yeah,
$1.25.
Yeah,
So
it was like double, or
if not
triple.
more.
Yeah.
So
And
relatively.
yeah, and there's a couple things working there. One back then, the pay in relation was way more, and plus summer was summer, so you worked from Memorial Weekend if you were off, you could work from Memorial Weekend until Labor Day. Easy, straight through. In fact, there used to be fights over shifts. And, you know, now summer is like maybe a month long for a lot of these people that are going to school because they're getting out in late June. A lot of them don't start getting schedules until after the new fiscal year, July 1st. And then they start school the first week of August.
Yeah.
So, you know, I talked to one of the guards in Huntington a couple of weeks ago, and she's worked for 8 years and still hasn't had a raise. So in what walk of life do you work that many years? I think on average, talking to people, even the guys that get to work a little more, it's taken them 4 to 6 years to get a raise. That's just one step.
To accrue like a year of complete work to where the
Yeah.
admin side of it goes, oh, you've worked for a quote unquote a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Versus a lot, I talked to other agencies, they'll on average get a raise at least every other year. You know, the system the state's working under was set up in the 50s. And so it worked back then because the whole seasonal schedule was, everything was different. And that needs to be revisited because it's not only are they, the state lifeguards, like I don't know about Orange County, but in San Diego County, state lifeguards used to be the top paying agency, or right there with San Diego City. We're now the second lowest paying agency in the county. And that with the combination of raises, it is really hurting us, and it's hurting us statewide. And quite frankly, because I'm involved really nationwide with the Lifeguard Association, all lifeguard agencies are having trouble recruiting people because of all the stuff we're talking about. It's the same thing for police officers. Nobody wants to be a cop. And as far as lifeguarding, you know, it's hard. You got to be physically fit.
Yes.
You're working outdoors by yourself with thousands of people trying to get in trouble. And you want to compound that with poor pay, no raises, no medical, go on and on and on. So that's really hurting us here in California, especially for the state lifeguards. That's the only thing saving us is we get to hire at 16, where almost all the other agencies in California, you got to be 18 to try out. So the trend is we get them from 16 to 18, which, okay, 17, you say 17.40 an hour?
Yeah,
starting
somewhere in there right now.
So say 17.40 an hour. If I'm 16 years old, living at home, mom and dad are taking care of basically everything, that's okay. But by the time I'm 18 and I'm on my own, having to pay for an apartment maybe, and school, that's not so good. And I can go to, well, I'll share this because this is one we were talking about. Mike will remember this. Back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, when lifeguarding was still paying pretty good, I used to go to McDonald's and Jack in the Box and get their applications, and I'd put them in the back of the classroom. And I would just put it out there. Look, if you can't handle it, there are job opportunities as these fine establishments. I couldn't do that now.
No.
Because they pay more than the state lifeguards do. My daughter works at In-N-Out's, making 20. She's only been there less than 3 years, is making $20 an hour.
Wow, is that right?
With dental, with a corporate
Jeez.
structure that it gives them gifts 2 or 3 times a year, pays for other outings. I mean, it's like
Wow.
Depressing in a way for the poor guards because they're not getting a lot, and there's so many tech jobs out there too that instantly are going to pay more than lifeguarding. So,
well, the other thing is that I think, like when we got hired on, it was on some level it was considered a pretty glamorous job. Well, now I think people have figured out that it's cool, and you're in the tower and you're looking good. But people realize a lot more now that it's a hard job, and you have to be in physical condition, and you have to pay the price in conditioning to do the job properly. And when you get a big day, it's ugly work. That we've all been there. You're in the tower, and it's 10 feet, and there's some guy starting to get sucked out in a rip, and you're like, oh my God, this is going to hurt, man.
Yeah.
And you come running back to the tower with a pound of sand in your pants, and So yeah, and when you have to do a CPR, it's like we used to call it sucking puke. I mean, it's not glamorous. It's important, and it's memorable, and it makes a huge difference in your community. But it's anything but glamorous.
Yeah, I really agree with you, though. I mean, the bottom line is the guards that we do have in the field are doing the age-old job of saving people's lives. And
Yes.
It's just they're not getting rewarded properly for it, so we can't keep them around. Drasco, we're training 200 people a year for the state lifeguards. That's unheard of. And I don't know if it's sustainable much longer because it's so expensive to train that many people.
Mm-hmm.
So, really the only answer is to raise the pay to try and keep them around longer than 2 years. And that's going to be down the line a couple more years, probably, if that ever gets done.
That's one of the reasons that, we all used to be opposed to lifeguard services being absorbed by the fire departments. But if you get absorbed by the fire department, several things. Number one, you're going to have the best equipment. Number two, you're going to have plenty of staffing. Number three, you're going to make better money. There's no question about it.
You're going to get the training.
Yep.
You get more advancement options.
So whatever.
It's kind of funny within the Lifeguard Association, the California Surf Life Saving Association, which is all the agencies in California. I've been going to those meetings for 30 years. And when the, it was LA County and Newport and those agencies first started going under fire, the kicking and screaming and complaining and whining about going under fire. And I'm going, time out. I've seen already exactly what you just said. The uniforms, the equipment, the training,
Yep.
the pay, the career opportunities, all gone through the roof. State lifeguards don't have a fire agency. We're still over here.
That's right.
And more so than the cities, when the state budget takes a hit, man, state parks gets annihilated.
Yeah.
Because they're a political carrot that gets dangled. So, you know what? We just won't have lifeguards. You know what? We'll close parks. And, they eventually respond and go, well, we got to have our parks and we got to have our lifeguards. But it never meant we were getting any extra money. It was just, we're going to stay in business. So that was always probably one of the hardest things working for state.
Yeah.
And was those budget cycles where, if you could just hold your own, it was always okay. But it was when you got hit hard, state parks was always really hit hard.
Yep.
For the size, we're like 0.1% of the budget, but we'd get hit like we were 50% of the budget as far as politics goes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that was always really hard.
And not to mention the parks. Why are people coming to California?
Yeah.
And where's the revenue being? Well, they're coming to the beaches.
That's right.
And they're spending their money and coming from all over the world.
All over the world.
To California to see. I mean, yeah, there's a million things to do, but a vast majority of it is we're going to the beach, right?
They've already done lots of reports on that of beach visitation and what it means to the local community money-wise. And I don't know. I'm not going to quote numbers, but I know South Carlsbad and San Leo, they did a study with those campgrounds there and what it meant to the local community, and it was like tens of millions of dollars for the local small vendors. I mean, it's like make or break their year.
Yep.
Shut down those campgrounds, gone. Yeah. So, boy, that went sideways.
No, not at all. I mean, these are things that worth talking about. On that same subject, with the talk of being a lot of the lifeguard services are under the fire department, so it's a fire department lifeguard division, right? And generally have more funding, if we're just generically speaking. With that trend, and if you guys had to say, hey, what's going to happen then? Because you've got the funding for all this stuff. You've got medical aids, all the things going. You've got whatever, all these different causes of, hey, well, we got this many heart attacks a year, or this many vehicle accidents that kill people. Well, drowning as a concept, right, is up there as one of the prevalent causes of injury to the public, right?
Yes.
So with that being said, and all those issues, where do you see in 5, 10, or 15 years all these people that have all this money? Where do you think it's going to be going towards? Lifeguards, will they be able to facilitate a change in that front? Is it going to have to all go to the fire department, or where do you see it going from here?
There's a lot of moves. We see it in San Diego. We're being attacked on both ends of fire agencies wanting to take over our beaches. And I used to be just 100% dead set against it. And it would be a sad day that we get to that point where the state lifeguards, to take it to the full extent, disappear because we can't afford to do business, because the legislature won't give. That's what I think angers me more than anything, because we're not talking in the big picture that much money to bring us up to par with everybody else. And in my opinion, the state lifeguards have always excelled and done a better job than anybody else with less, consistently over the years. Our training program is recognized as one of the best in the world, and we do it on a dime compared to other places. Work in the field, short-handed, understaffed, underfunded over the years. Lifeguards always rallied and got the job done, and got it job in a really solid way. And it's kind of crazy because within our own department in Sacramento at times they've been going, man, you guys, there's nothing that you guards can't do. And okay, show us some love, but then the love doesn't come.
Yeah.
It kind of like when the peace officer class first started, and we first started seeing lifeguards. The first couple, there was just a few that went through. I think I was in one of the first really big dozen groups, and they go to scenarios, and this lifeguards just absolutely kill the scenarios,
right?
And without hurting anybody, and they were like going, who are you? Who are you guys? How are you doing this? Well, I've been doing this same job in a pair of red trunks with a buoy for 10 years. I mean, I'm glad you're going to give me a badge and a gun, but I've gotten really good about talking people down and out and in the right direction, because that's the only tools we have, is our presence and our voice. So
Yeah, something's got to give at some point. I mean, either because just the pay issue alone, but just this whole thing, you're recruiting and training 200 people a year, and then they're leaving at the first opportunity. I mean, that's not a good way to run a business. And so something's got to give. And if it takes, I'd hate to see the state lifeguards go by the wayside too, but if it takes bringing the fire department in or CAL FIRE or whatever it takes, if it makes things better, then that's the way we have to go.
It's a complicated issue because, let's just say if you brought the fire in to handle the lifeguarding, what happens with the permanent lifeguard peace officers? Where do they fit? And then what if you're in, like most of the districts still have a lot of rangers working? Where do they fit in that? And so you have San Luis Obispo Fire is running the lifeguard service, but we've got the rangers running the enforcement. I mean,
it's a whole
different can of worms. But I agree with Mike. I mean, it's getting to the critical point of something's got to give, and I don't know. At least it's become a nationwide issue that everybody's having trouble recruiting, everybody's having trouble retention. Even LA County, I was talking to him yesterday, and they pay really good money. Relative, I mean, it's a higher cost of living up there, but they still, if you put it all in perspective, they start at good money, they get raises, they have a lot of opportunities.
I think they start at like 26.
Yeah.
Maybe $27 an hour.
And they get EMT differentials, and everything under the sun. But they're having trouble recruiting and retaining. So it's across the board. It's kind of one of those things that you wonder, it's kind of, you need to get society to realize what the job the lifeguards are doing, what they're asking, especially 16 and 18-year-old, 20-year-old kids to do, and start comparing it to what's going on. Okay, let's compare it to In-N-Out. If we're going to pay In-N-Out, and I think they do, they have a tough job working with the public. They deserve $20 an hour in California. That's what's everybody. The paper today had minimum wage starts July 1st, goes up to $15.50. So that's minimum wage. Our guards are only making $17.40. So that's not a good place to be. But somehow that comparison's got, wait a minute, we're paying somebody to serve food, and I'm not knocking that industry, $20 an hour, and we're paying somebody that saves lives and puts their life on the line on a daily basis, $17 an hour. It's trying to get the legislators to really see kind of like what your whole project is about. It's to try and make them realize what a difficult job, what a dangerous job, what an important job. No matter who they're working for, whether it's fire or state or county or city, that could almost be put aside. It's recognizing what a lifeguard does in Southern California, period. Because we got guards all the way up to Humboldt now. So it's a vital one. It's kind of like if you could create a vacuum, take all the lifeguards, city, county, state, all the lifeguards in California off the beaches in the middle of summer on 4th of July weekend, and just see what reaction you got from the public then would be. I mean, I gotta believe everybody, where's my lifeguard?
If they have any sense, they'll say that.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that, and I wasn't going to ask you, but that's literally a question I wrote down. I said, well, just for fun, really, for both of you, I said, what do you think would happen if on 4th of July on a busy weekend in California across the board you took every lifeguard off the beach? And you kind of touched on it, right? Everyone would be outraged. But people would probably still go in the ocean, and then it would probably be...
If there was surf, even if there wasn't surf, but certainly if there was a little surf,
it would be
USLA
chaos.
hates it when we say, well, people were drowned. And Sacramento always said, well, you can't predict that. I can't predict it, but you could look at the statistics, and the stats are overwhelming that if you have eyes on water, the chances of drowning drops into less than 1%. I forget what it is exactly, but it's infinitesimal. You take the eyes off the water on a busy beach, the odds go up. And so, 4th of July weekend, and people are going to come there because there's going to be a lot of people go, whoa, cool. pull out the beer, the wine, the booze, and everything else under the sun, and then you've got the worst possible conditions, and you got fights, and you would have, I think, some like Huntington Pier riot situations, where it just gets to be a hotbed where it's like no matter what you do, it's going to explode. And you'd have the worst part of it is you'd have the really sad things where really good families doing the really good things, trying to have a good time, and someone drowns, or not even drowns, just they break their neck, something that maybe could have been kept from happening if the guards were on duty making their safety concepts. Don't dive here, don't jump there.
Yep.
All the things that we do, don't dig in the sand. Gosh, you could think of a million things that could go wrong without the guards down there making, the preventatives that we do. So that would be a horror movie.
Yeah, lifeguard. I mean, if you had a flat day on the 4th of July, you could probably pull it off without any guards there in terms of just water activity, although it would be chaotic. But if you had a 6-foot surf and there were rips pulling, people are probably going to drown. If they don't drown, they're not going to have fun.
No.
And man, I don't even want to think about that. I mean, in L.A. in the early part of the 19th or the 20th century, people were drowning right, left, and center, and that's why they had volunteer lifeguards. But you just can't leave people hanging out there to dry on the beach by themselves. I mean, it's not. I don't want to say it's morally incorrect, but if people are going to come down and spend business money at your businesses and pay money to park in your parking lots, you're inviting them to come in. It's your obligation, your moral obligation, to provide safety services for when they go in the water, because a lot of people don't swim worth a damn.
That's what is bothersome now, is that we're charging more money than ever to come into our parks and park for the day, and then not opening towers. I mean, that's just wrong.
Well, I think it's $15.
$15
maybe for a day.
Yeah.
If you're paying the lifeguard $15, but there's how many hundreds of cars in there that are paying $15 for the day, and you can't pay just a little bit.
And I think most of them are coming in with the expectation we're going to have a clean restroom. We're going to have lifeguards to keep the peace and keep everybody safe. And it's right now, it's not the lifeguards' fault. They just don't have enough guards to open the towers.
Right.
And one thing I just thought of that's really changed. That's changed the whole dynamic of lifeguard agencies everywhere in the whole nation, but certainly here in California, has been the growth of the junior guard programs. No one saw that coming, and the junior guard programs have grown exponentially when the lifeguard recruiting and retention has gone down exponentially. So, and it historically not all, but most of the really strong lifeguards, they try to get them into the junior guard programs, and so now you lose mentors and experience in the field, and in some ways people get to move up the ladder quicker, but ultimately it's a numbers game. There's so many people in lifeguards getting sucked into doing the junior guard program that normally would be working the field. The field is now suffering. If you talk to any agency, they're all in the same boat,
and they tend to be your best people.
And well, I don't care if I get in trouble for saying this. It doesn't matter anymore. The problem is too, that was the whole program was meant to be a ocean safety program for the community, and which it was very strongly. And I'm not saying it isn't now; it's still a good program, but people saw it as a moneymaker, and there are too many junior guard programs being told to increase their numbers just to raise money, and in the meantime the junior guard program quality is going down, their money's going up, going and siphon off to other programs, and crippling. I would even be okay if they said, okay, you got to do more junior guards so we get more money, we'll all go towards lifeguards so we could hire more lifeguards. I'd be fine with that, but that's not where the money's going. And so it's, when I was a junior guard instructor, the programs were 6 weeks long. I mean, we taught them a full first aid class, CPR. They were buffed in the ocean when they got done. We got our absolute best lifeguards back in the day out of the junior guard program.
There's even stories of junior guards going in and helping with rescues and stuff, right? When they've been there
doing
around
CPRs,
for a while.
everything. They did. I mean, we used to. People took advantage of that because I used to schedule them into towers, but they were supposed to be towers with lifeguards in them. And then some of the guards, if the permanent wasn't down there to check on it, they'd look around and go, well, we'll just put the junior guard in this tower and we'll keep this one open. And they were strong enough back in those days that they could do it. I mean, they were really, really strong junior guard candidates. But,
one of the big issues is that as an entity, lifeguards are not politically strong.
Mm-hmm.
There was one period of about 10 years where I wouldn't say we were strong, but we were stronger than we are now. But we forced the hand of the state to put programs at Monterey, Russian River, and they got augmentations for Santa Cruz and some of Malibu and some of the other programs. And that was a process, and it was not a fun process. But I don't see any of that happening now. And
no, in fact, now you fought tooth and nail. I mean, that was killing you at the time. You guys have a lot of battle scars from that period. I remember it. Now they're creating junior guard programs before the lifeguard programs. So
that's
they're
right.
putting junior guard programs in place with no lifeguard
like Patrick's
program.
Point,
Yeah, and I can remember that started happening even. Toward the end of my career, I'm going, we can't do it. That's backwards. We can't do it that way. So, I mean, the junior guards is just another can of worms that's out there. Yeah. But along your lines with the politics that's what I'm trying to do within the associations is get everybody working, all the agencies working together to be one collective of look at us and not a city, county, private, state standalone, because we used to be very provincial. That was the one thing in our day that we were very, don't cross our borders, don't pick our rescues, don't send us your problems, that type of thing. And that probably changed when we moved into LA County, and had to operate our beaches for that year, where everybody went, well, we're all in this together. But I think if we can get to where the lifeguards all work in unison together politically, we could probably start seeing some people that are in the legislature take notice, because now we're not talking about just the state we're talking city, county, state, private, everybody. With it, you were saying the way everybody's saying the same thing, the same message from everybody. It would be a lot more powerful. That's kind of what Fire was able to do going way back, was they started getting together and go, well, why have my vehicle be different than yours? Why can't we all have the same vehicle setup? Why don't we all wear basically the same uniform? Why isn't all of our language exactly the same? And that's what's going on it's getting there. I mean,
see, all that stuff is codified in law.
Yeah.
So there's no choice. They got those big thick books. I don't remember the name of them, but every task that they do is codified.
But they did that by getting together as one group, sitting in the same room and coming to an agreement of what. I don't know the names, but there's a certain rescue vehicle that they're going to have. What's going to be on that rig? It's this, and that's kind of, with the Marine chiefs being formed, I think it's a big step where all the Marine chiefs in California meet a few times a year, and it's just the beginning of it. But I think that's where it needs to really go. I know there's Rob Williams from Newport. That's his big vision, is getting it into law. Yeah. So that everything is, we have to meet those and basically follow the fire guideline.
Yeah, it takes a core of people. I've been in this position. It takes a core of people who are dedicated to that with a vision to carry it through. And it's, it ain't working on the beach. I mean, there's something about, lifeguards are good people, and a lot of I don't want to lump everybody into one basket, but a lot of lifeguards, they want to show up to work, they want to put in their 8, they want to hit the surf, they want to dive, but they look at the gritty, ugly politic thing, and they're just like, I ain't coming anywhere near that. And for some reason, the fire departments attract people that are much more inclined to do that sort of thing. LA County they've always been pretty politically active. I don't have the impression that they are now as much as they used to be, but they're in the fire department now, so they don't have to be. It's all lumped into one thing.
But yeah, I think that's important, is just getting everybody on the same page and to come together. And once again, lifeguarding is that kind of redheaded stepchild of the EMS service, right? People generally know what law enforcement is doing, firefighting as well. All this stuff has been out there, but
I know.
We just
a great example, just a real current great one, is when the pandemic hit. And they have the big table up in Sacramento where they got all the, EMS is represented and all the fire represented. There's not a lifeguard at the table. So what happens? There's not one lifeguard agency in the state that opened or closed their beaches on the same day in the same way with the same rules. And what happened? The poor guards got annihilated.
And because everyone during that said, "Oh, we're not going to work. We're not going anywhere else. It's hot outside. Where are we going?"
Yeah, we go to the beach.
To the beach during the off season when there's no one to work.
We had but I know Carlsbad City, no rules. I shouldn't. A city, no rules. State beach, you can't put your tail end in the sand. You can go to the beach as long as you're walking or running. You can go in the water and go surfing. You can't set up a chair and sit down. And that was just
lasted about
jumped
5
out
minutes.
at me that we did not have somebody at the table going up inside and going, listen, if all the beaches need to do this on the same day, the same way, same rules, period. Because, the people don't differentiate really between city beach, state beach, anything. They're just going, I'm going to the beach.
Yep.
And so if we would have been able to roll it all out the same way, that would have avoided so much carnage for the lifeguards. They did that, UCSD did that report on the effects of COVID on the lifeguard operations, and that was one of the biggest things that jumped out, was the fact that it was rolled out in so many different ways with so little information, no extra training.
Yeah.
A lot of the veteran guards going, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up to be a lifeguard.
Right.
And they were, instead they were having to do and they were having to advise people, you can't sit down, you can't do this, and public's telling them, well, forget you.
Yeah, the way that rolled out in San Clemente was the first day that happened. There was a really large law enforcement. Of course, I was curious, so I went down to check it out. But there was a large law enforcement presence, and they would tell people, you can't do this, you can't do that, and there was a little surf. It was a busy day, and so people just kind of walked out and they went, hell, we're just going to sit down. So they sat down, and the lifeguards would come up and start talking to them, and the police are just standing there with their arms crossed, just kind of checking things out. And the next day, there was nothing.
Well, that was one of the other things that came out of that report, was there was no enforcement support.
Yep.
It was left entirely up to the lifeguards.
Yep.
And one thing that came out of that, they were going, we weren't given any tools or training on how to de-escalate.
Yeah.
So that out of that has come some de-escalation training for the field guards, which is good. Right. But it was like that should have happened first.
Yeah.
And not to mention the verbal abuse they were taking from everyone, because that was the scapegoat of the COVID beast of, what do you mean we can't sit? And it's, here you go, having a lifeguard that just wanted a couple extra hours in the shoulder season. Yeah. Just taking verbal abuse all day based on people who were unhappy that they couldn't go sit at the beach. So it's not my fault. It's just, I'm just the messenger. I'm just here on my shift.
And then they worked guards to death. That was another. They just worked them overtime so much that the guards were totally burned out.
It was summertime conditions overnight, right? Because everyone showed up, and then there was actually heat waves and swell and everything.
Yeah. It was ugly.
It's insane.
Ugly situation.
Yeah. Here's another example. I told this at the CSLSA meeting. When I was doing my taxes this year, somebody called me and said, "Hey, there's an exemption for public safety personnel." So I looked it up, and I was reading the thing. It's a tax break for people that work in the fields of public safety. So I'm like, oh, cool. So I looked down the list, and it's like, police officers, firefighters, ambulance drivers, registered nurses, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, where's the lifeguards? Well, at the end, it's specifically excluded from the law were lifeguards and some other other things. But I thought, this typifies the struggle lifeguards have. It's a constant battle for credibility.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
What do you think stemmed that? Where do you think that came from, that we're losing that credibility, or always has this image of Baywatch or whatever? I mean, where did that come from?
Well, that's been around since time immemorial. I mean, people see, like, even when lifeguard services started in Southern California, people are like, "Oh yeah, you got it made, dude. You're in the tower and you're winking at the girls, and and it's just a stereotype that's carried over really for a century, and and I think it's fair to say it's gotten a little better. Like in my town, people understand, and they give you your credibility, but people coming from Riverside, or they look at you and they're like, what a waste of taxpayers' money. What's this guy doing? So that that stereotype is still alive and well, unfortunately.
Hollywood didn't help us.
No,
at all in that realm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of dumbfounding a little bit. I think it shows that people are so unaware of their environment. Like when they come to the beach, they just check out, because if you just, and we've all heard it from people, with the people that do look, oh my gosh, that guy didn't stop running all day long. 8 hours I've sat here on the beach today, and that guy didn't stop running the whole time, in and out of the water. So if you just watch, how busy the guards are. But I think most people just put the blinders on, check out, and don't notice, because it's easy to look up and go, the guy's tan, standing in the tower in the sun with his shirt off. She's
must be nice.
She's in a bikini in the tower. Must be nice. They're making a ton of money. That type of thing, but not realizing how active they are. We all know there's slow days, but when it's busy, it's busy.
Yep.
And what I guarantee you nobody thinks about, I didn't think about when I was a lifeguarding, was the physical effects of the job on me, the physical toll. Of not just lifeguarding. I mean, a little bit of active life all led to it, but when Mike and I started, all my 10 years as a seasonal, there was a ladder to get in the tower, but you jumped out of every tower.
That's right.
And
and
that had to have an effect. I've had a knee replacement, hip replacement. I mean, that's got to have had an impact on my knees and my hips and my back. And
the physical training that we did. As well. I mean, I trained until the day I retired. I still train, and and my body is really paying the price for it, as I'm sure yours
shoulders.
Is. Shoulders.
Any lifeguard that's been around for
skin cancers,
especially if you surfed on top of that and body surf and swam and played polo, your shoulders are shot. Nobody thinks about the sun damage to your skin, your eyes, your ears. I've already had to have my ears drilled out once so I can still hear, and now I can't hear again, and it drives my wife nuts. And, there's a physical toll in, and to be fair, in any public safety job, whether you're a police officer, firefighter, medic, EMT, lifeguard, if you're in that, you're lifting, you're grinding, you're doing physical work. And I know I've had a lot of conversations with many of my friends, because the public safety retirement, where you retire at 50. Well, I got it 50, but now it's 54, I believe. There's a reason, because when you get to be 50, and you're tasked with, as a peace officer, wrestling a 20-year-old guy that's in the prime of life
on meth or something.
On top
of
meth,
that,
or a medic trying to control somebody, or the lifeguards just going out in a 10-foot day. I know we've talked about that before. That's big reality hit me my last couple of years of going, especially because other agencies had the PWCs and we didn't. Like,
yeah, when you're 50, man, you're not the guy they want on the front lines in 10-foot surf.
Yeah. Am I gonna survive? Yeah, but am I gonna get from here to there in time to make a difference?
And drag his ass in.
So I think, like I said, I've had a lot of lengthy discussions and opened up some of my friends' eyes of like, just think about it for a little bit about the longer you're in that type line of work, how many miles you put on your body.
Right.
And on top of that, most people they're active to begin with. They surf, they dive, they travel, they hike, they rock climb. I mean, all that stuff starts taking a toll on your physically.
Yeah, if you're a lifeguard and you take it seriously, like most of us did, you work out because you don't want to be that guy in 8 or 10 foot surf going, I haven't been working out enough. I'm gonna freaking die. I mean, you have to train to be a lifeguard. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, that was the beauty of the requal swim every year, and the big reminder.
Yeah,
because you either went in and said, "Cool, I'm in pretty good shape," or you went, I better start working out a little bit more, because that shouldn't have been that hard.
That was pathetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never pathetic, but sometimes harder than it should have been.
Yeah. Well, not to mention too, I think there's been a shift in the culture just even from when I started to now, and I would reckon to say even from when you guys started, as far as the mental health side of it too. I mean, you've got there's plenty of stories where the kids are calling us right after training or whatever, going, "Hey, you taught me CPR last week. I just did it for the first time. I didn't know that's how it was going to go, but thanks for showing me that." And then having, expecting, not, you're expecting, you're training a 16-year-old kid sometimes to perform these life-saving measures. And then we're not giving them mental health training in life. There's no time for that. There's no time to explain to them how to tell someone that someone they love just died in their family, and they fall into that situation just by the grace of whatever's going on with the ocean that day.
It's coming since the pandemic, that has come to the forefront for lifeguarding, for peer pressure, peer group support, and counseling, and what probably you too, when you started, certainly when we started, we dealt with traumatic injuries and deaths and stuff, and our way to fix that was to go drink beer and kind of make light of it, and or just pat ourselves on the back and have some beers, but never address it as it's bothering me. Seeing that child not coming back and their parents over there, that bothers me. I think Mike was the first that I saw that started a peer support group with that drowning at Huntington that year, where you brought everybody in and out of the field, and that's luckily that is being looked at a lot more, and in part of it, a lot of it's from that report from UCSD, because the guards were all saying, I didn't feel like anybody had my back. I didn't know where to turn. We all know that 18 to 24 or teenage suicides are going through the roof, just from society. Let alone you put the pressures of lifeguarding. It does make me really glad, though, the way we teach. We were talking about, you were outside, but when you were 16, you went through lifeguard training, and on your way home saw an accident, and patient assessment form popped into your head. And
Still in my training uniform.
In your
which I was supposed to take off, but I was too excited.
Probably slept in it that night.
But how do you, with a 16-year-old, it's tough because they're still, from my own experience, I couldn't wait to get that first big rescue and that first CPR, and I wanted to, have the experience of a death that I dealt with under my belt so I could gain credibility. But as you go on and you see more and more of that, it does take a toll on you. And with a 16-year-old, how do you train them? Like the stuff I wrote in this book, I don't know if you want to over stress that at that age. When they're 20, 22, 25, that's something else. But
I think that's where most of what we're looking at is is like the educational conference where it's not that it excludes rookies, but it's more for the guards that are working the field.
Yeah.
Have been in there for a few years of
Right.
the peer group support, and especially the count, because every agency provides, some form of employee assistance program where you can get, confidential counseling, just letting people know that it's available without beating them over the head that somebody's going to die every day on the job. And, everything's going to be terrible. But it's a fine line because society is different now, and the number of suicides happening out of high school and up to 24 years of age is really,
it's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable right now for a lot of different factors, but it's still so. I don't know.
It's
somehow
all because
it needs to be brought up and at least discussed to some level. Maybe you increase the level of participation and information as they move up a little bit.
All the suicides, my observation, not all of them, but a lot of them, we've been reading about those athletes and super students, and I think it's just the pressure that's put on them and the pressure they put on themselves, to succeed. I mean, because, the recent 3 women that killed themselves, star athletes, they all went to big-time universities and all that stuff, and there's just the expectations that we have of our kids these days are, pretty heavy. And, maybe that explains a lot about the differences between our generations.
I think you just need to provide something because, most handle it pretty good because they've been told this is what could happen on the job. That's what we give them, all the CPR training and the first aid and the bleeding control. And some of them get it right off the bat. And I've had just as many positive responses of going, I kind of panicked, and then I saw the patient assessment form in front of my eyes. I kind of panicked, and then I just saw that and went right into my CPR. And then they performed perfectly. Mm-hmm. And it reinforced, the training that you got. But there's been a few that really struggled with it. Yeah. And some that never came back, They left the job. And I think more left it, though, along what you were saying, is when guards work for 10 or 15 years, when they get that far in, for me, like, when I was a seasonal in the tower, it's like firing off on rescues was autopilot. It was fun. It was what you did. And in fact, it was horrible when you couldn't go out and make rescues. But then you put on all the garbage. You put on the uniform and the badge and the gun, and you get weighted down with all that stuff, and you're driving around and you're still seeing the things as a tower lifeguard, like the signs. But I started really struggling with, like, should I take my stuff off? Which way do I go now? Yeah. I know some of the guards that worked for a long time, even the twos and stuff, that's what got in their head, was like they overthought. You start overthinking it instead of just the pure, go. You go, and they didn't need help, so what? But then you got enough knowledge to be looking at everything all at once and start overthinking and kind of stressing yourself on whether I should go or not. And I know a few of the older guards, that's why I just couldn't take it any longer. I didn't know if I was going to make the right decision or not.
And all that increases your stress.
Yeah,
heavily.
Big time, heavily.
That you mentioned that drowning at Huntington. It was a rookie lifeguard in the tower, and he was good for a rookie. He was really good. And long story short, it happened in his water, and it was there were mitigating circumstances.
What year was this? That you guys went? Which
one
are you guys
2003.
Yeah,
2003.
It was during lifeguard training.
Yeah, and so it was just we called out everybody in the world, and he's a young. I mean, he had been a lifeguard for like 10 days, so he had very little experience, and so and when he came out of training, I mean, he did a really impressive job in training, and so it happened. He dove. We pulled him out of the water to talk to him about what happened, and the rest. And we call everybody that wasn't nailed down. We called him down to do a dive line, and we were so strapped for bodies that we had him. I mean, he was he was a basket case. He was like, somebody's drowning my water. I mean, he
What
was
was
just
the circumstance of the drowning? Like just one person, or
well, it was one person. It was on the JG Island at Huntington, right by the Santa Ana River.
Mhm.
And there was hardly anybody out there, but there was a ton of people to the right. And he had made he'd been out like 10 or 15 times already. And so he was kind of focusing over that way. And, he was doing his job, and it was a really choppy kind of a day. And these two kids went out, and one of them just went down like that. And he didn't see it.
how old?
The lifeguard?
The kids that went down.
Oh, the kid that went down was 14. So, and his parents were there, and it was just awful. And the mother was there, and she was crying, and she was not happy with the lifeguard that was in the tower, and that hurt. And so anyway, at the end of the day, we after the deal was done, we had a debrief at headquarters there at Huntington in the garage. And we kind of did some stuff on that earlier, but this was like kind of the first formal debrief that we had there. And God, you were there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget this. I asked the kid, because you're professional, you've got to analyze what you did and how can we do it better next time. And so I asked him, tell us how it went down, and what you did in response. And he just lost it. He just was broken down, and oh my God, it was just awful. And the coolest thing was that everybody in the room, Eric Dimmel everybody was stunned. Eric Dimmel walked across the room and kind of took him in his arms and said, it's okay, man, we're here for you. And then with that, everybody else came in and kind of gathered around him. I mean, it was really touching. So, yeah, and so I know that I see that guy once in a while. He's still a lifeguard. He's an LA County guy. I love that guy. But you take that with you. You never forget that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about putting young guys in the tower, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds. That's a tough one. That's a real tough one.
I remember that from because we had training going on, and we stopped and we pulled the whole class out and put them in that search line.
Right.
And the energy level was pretty high, so it's like, just get out there, let's go. And I remember when I was in the line and people were diving, I looked up and I could tell some of the trainees were like, they'd never dove underwater in the ocean, and it was very choppy.
Yeah.
The water was moving, it was like out of control. And I finally realized, okay, pulled them all out. Anybody who's not comfortable doing this, no harm, no foul, no shame at all. You guys can be spotters on the beach. I only want people that have been into skin diving that are comfortable opening your eyes underwater without a mask, because we didn't have nobody had a mask with them at the time. And that was at first kind of scary for me, because I realizing that there were some of them that were like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And I didn't want, we didn't lose anybody because of it, but also was a huge eye opener.
Yeah.
What a reality check for training. See?
Yep.
This is when
real.
it gets real. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Was there a time in your guys' lives personally where you had a situation like that brought you to that same kind of feeling, or a rescue you could think of that was kind of on that?
I mean, I had some close rescue. I never had anybody drown in my proximity, even remotely.
But not necessarily just a time, I guess, more on the mental health side of it, or the mental, where you're going, wow, it might not have been a drowning, but something where it brought that out. And
the biggest time for me was my last winter of work, and that was the winter where it was like legit running 15 foot up and down the coast, even bigger up like in Newport and stuff. But I mean, Pono was solid, Tamarack. And
what year was this?
It was winter of 2006-07. And I was at Pono, and I was by myself. There was nobody on. I mean, just somebody else was up at Tamarack, I think. and the other agencies all had the PWCs, and people were coming down and dropping their kids off with their bodyboards, and what are you doing? I remember kind of losing it, like just kind of screaming at parents, going, "What are you thinking? It's 15 foot out here." The kids are showing up with bodyboards and no fins, and it's like, and just running around trying to do preventative. But in my mind, I'm looking at it going, if somebody is out there and in trouble, again, I'd survive. I'm not worried about survive, but am I going to get from point A to point B in time? Because I was 54 years old by then, and like Mike said, I just wasn't as strong or fast or any of that. I still was in good shape for 54 years old, but that was the time it really bothered me, almost to the point of going, man, I got to be done today. And then I got through the day and got talked about it a little bit with my wife that night, and then it just turns out that when I went and saw CalPERS and they said, well, you're done, I went, okay, and I worked through Labor Day and actually had the most fun summer I ever had at the same point. I got through the winter, really bothered me, and then the summer I just went into just going, I'm going to have fun. I mean, literally every weekend I just buy a big cooler full of popsicles and watermelon and go tower to tower and just have a good time. If I went on enforcement contact with certain officers that like to blow things up, I just kept a smile on my face and enjoyed it, But I think that was I had the I think what led to is I had those ongoing doubts. Am I waiting too long? Am I thinking too much? Instead of just taking the stuff off and going in the water. Because if, it didn't happen as often toward the end as a peace officer, because we also had more and more seasonals working all year round. But I can remember the few times I made winter rescues where I actually took the gear off, put it in, went out in the water, and then went, that was cool. It kind of brings you back. And it was the in-between of overthinking about, do I go? Is this guy going to get in? Is it okay? Instead of just strip down, go, get it over with, and get a good swim in.
And I think it's a thing that people misunderstand about the profession too, is they see someone standing in the tower, shirt off, driving in the unit. Oh, best job in the world. I mean, yeah, it is the best job in the world. But exactly what you're just saying, I just want to make it vocalize that your brain is going all day.
Yes, that's right.
And now,
that's right.
Right, there's this constant state of alertness where you aren't shutting it off, and that adds up. And then you're saying, here you are 50 years later of doing that.
Yeah,
that adds up.
Yeah.
You're not going to work and just hanging at the beach, because that's what the illusion people have. They're hanging out.
Right.
They think the same for you. You're seeing everything. You're thinking of the situation. You're anticipating. Those parents bringing those kids that day to the ocean, they're like, well, it's just the ocean. What? They haven't felt what a 15-foot wave crashing on them, or pulling a rip, or pulling a body through that to bring it in.
Yeah,
feels like. So you can't necessarily blame them for that, because they don't have the awareness. But for us, we sit there with that, and you're holding on to that for that amount of time, and then there's a point where so not to interrupt, but just to make that clear, is like, that's the whole. You're always on this sense of.
It's kind of like one of those reactions. It's one of those things you're looking at it going, really? We had a few local surfers that they were great athletes, great surfers, great ocean people, went through lifeguard training, couldn't lifeguard at all. They saw stuff, but because they were so good in the water, nobody could get in trouble in this. How can they be in trouble? Well, and that's kind of like I'm looking at that and going, how can you even think of what you're doing? But I agree with you. It's just more that's what builds up over 20, 30, 40, 50 years of watching it. And that's what I mean by the overthinking. Now my brain is going around and around and around instead of just reacting the way it did back when you're a tower guard, where you just react and go. And you don't think too much.
Mm-hmm. And Brousard, what about yourself?
Yeah, I got taught a lesson early on, and it really affected me for a long time. The first 3 years I worked, we had some pretty good sized surf, but one year I was a third or fourth year guard. We got one of those big, huge, south swells out of New Zealand come pushing in, and I tried to remember. I thought I was working with Nick Sofa, and he didn't remember this, but I was working with somebody in the patrol car, and I'm just like, it was the biggest surf I'd ever seen, let alone been in. And we had a lot of inside rescues that day, and it was just one of those days where these big whitewater things are just rolling over you, and you're clawing your way to the surface. And I didn't understand until that was a 4 or 5 day swell. I didn't understand until then what I was doing and how dangerous it was. And at the end of that day, I was just exhausted. And I had one outside rescue where I swam out and got this woman, and in those days I didn't have enough sense to kind of feel my way through and realize the ocean's in charge, and you're not going to overpower it. You just you got to. And when you have an opportunity to go, you go. If you're caught inside, you just wait it out or whatever you have to do. So anyway, I got out there and I was exhausted, and so I was pulling her in, and I was trying to avoid this one area that it's right at a culvert, and there's always a rip there when the surf's big. And so I was swimming her in, and I was trying like hell to avoid that area. Well, unfortunately, we got hit by a set, and she came out of the buoy, and I had to find her. And a surfer actually paddled over and grabbed her. And the next thing I know, we're in that friggin' rip. And so I came out of the water, and I'm just like, holy crap, I was really, really tired. And the guy I was with said, look, man, I know you're a big star and all that shit, and you're a fast swimmer, but you got to pace yourself. Do you have a rescue in you right now? And I said, yeah, sure. And he goes, bullshit. You're worthless right now. So that was like a 5 day swell, and from that point on, my stress level went up to here, and it took me a long time. It took me 10 years probably or more to get to the point where I adapted to the job. And so, yeah, and that definitely affected my mental health. I mean, I would have panic attacks sometimes. I mean, it was not fun. But by that time, I loved the job and the people I worked with so much that, I was going to make it work if there was any possible way to do it. So, so that's my story.
Yeah, and I mean, neither of those are like crazy drowning stories, and it doesn't have to be that dramatic instance, right? And that's, I think, the message there is that people forget there's just, like you're saying, it's kind of like this feeling of not helplessness, but in a way you have this realization of like, this is dangerous.
Yeah.
Am I gonna, a little bit of self-doubt, right? And then you're still there to give yourself to other people, but in the end you're using your body to,
that's right,
sacrificing your body to make those decisions for your own preservation, but then for the preservation of others. And I think it's that subtle burn in my whatever years of experience that, and the few things that I've had working in the career. And it's cool to hear both. It's not like some dramatic, like 20 people died and there's blood everywhere and whatever. It's not this dramatic thing. It's the solo moment by yourself.
Yeah.
Looking at that, it's not Armageddon. It's And it is cumulative. It just is. And and that's true for all the EMS stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. For fire, medics, police, same. I mean, that's all been proven, the cumulative effect, because you don't dump that out of your memory. It's always there. And I know that in some of those things, too, there's just little triggers for me where it's just like everything's fine, and then see one thing and it trigger and you into going, here we go, man.
That is so true. That is so true. I don't know.
You're not in control at that point. It's like, dang.
Yeah, there are things that you never forget, and you never really put behind you. You just have to deal with them.
Yeah, absolutely on that.
Jeez.
Yeah. And I think the image there is, once again, for lifeguards, we're always seen, though, at the beach, tanning, hanging out.
Yes.
So you don't think about it in the same way of law enforcement or EMS or fire, right?
Yeah.
It's a different, people just don't have that thought process towards us, but it's a very similar thing.
Yeah, it's so much easier, I think, for most people to associate with a burning building, a guns and weapons,
Right.
and multiple vehicle traffic accidents with multiple traumas versus the pretty white waves.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, not to mention, you could have all three of those as a lifeguard at Huntington, right? You just made a rescue because you took all your gear off. You put it back on because there's a vehicle accident at whatever, where people are flying down the Pacific Coast Highway there.
Yeah.
And now you're dealing with the law enforcement of that because, let's say it's a DUI, and you're treating the people who are injured in that accident. So you've got this, you're like doing three jobs in one.
Yeah.
Basically.
I think Denny Stouffer always used to put it best, lifeguards wear a number of different hats.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what can complicate it for sure.
God, I got to tell one more story, but
Please, that's what we're here to do.
This is one of the last years I worked. It was like 2006 or something, and it was a pretty flat day, and it was San Onofre, and I got a call that the guard was fishing, a body out of the water at Dog Patch, which is at the south end of Surf Beach. And so I rolled down there, and the unit was there, and they were pulling him up, and he had no pulse and wasn't breathing, so they started CPR, and we had defibrillators by then, so they were shocking him, and it was a huge scene. Everybody on the beach came and was watching, and the medic showed up, and the guards performed splendidly. I mean, it was fantastic. But they took the guy away, and he ended up dying. So a ranger and I went up to the hospital, the local hospital, and just to get some stuff for the report. And we went in there, and we said, we need some information. And he goes, okay, has anybody contacted the family? And I said no. And one of the nurses said, oh, there's like 7 or 8 of this guy's friends are out in the waiting room, and none of them knew he'd passed away. And they had called his parents. And so I'm like, oh geez. So the parents showed up about a half an hour later, and we were still there, and the nurses said, hey, you should make the notification, and not something high in your list of things to do. And so and nobody was saying anything to the parents or the people out in the waiting room, and they were getting more and more freaked out by the second. And so at some point, one of the nurses came out and grabbed them and put them in a little room adjacent to the ER. And as she walked by me, she said, you need to make the notification on this. I'm like, oh, geez. And so I turned to the doctor. I said, look, man, this is your thing. She's probably going to blame me for this. He's like, I'm not doing it. And so I'm like, oh, God, all right. So the ranger and I, we kind of fired ourselves up. And just before we went in, the doctor came over and he goes, all right, I'll make the notifications. So all 3 of us went in there. And we opened the door, and as soon as the mother saw us, she went, and she just started crying uncontrollably. I mean, there's nothing you can say. She knew why we were there, and the kid's brother and his dad were there too, and it was just, that's one of those things where sometimes I'm doing something, and that moment flashes into my mind. It's just unforgettable stuff.
Yeah. On a more fun one, pre AED, and you've heard this before, but we'll get it on tape, because I did, I don't know, 12 or 15 CPRs over the years. Only one left with a pulse after we did CPR, no AED. And Mark Allen and I were working at the Carlsbad Street Fair. And probably because, most of the stuff I dealt with were drownings or, really bad trauma. And this one was a guy dropped 50 feet from us right there. So we were on him within 30 seconds.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so Mark was on ventilations and I was on compressions. And I can remember a couple of things that just stood out to me. One, it was a scorching hot day, and I'm in my shorts, blue shorts, and we're both in our Pope and everything. And then kneeling down and just my knees just started sizzling. And,
Oh, my
it's
God.
Like, but I'm doing the compressions and waiting for the medics to get there. And a group formed all around us. It was just like this big semicircle. We were up against a wall with the sidewalk, and anyway, so I'm doing the compressions. We're working the guy up, and all of a sudden, this guy just standing right behind me. God, check it out! The guy's a friggin' machine. And that was like the best compliment I ever had in my entire career. And he's the only one that by the time the medics got there, he had a pulse. They wouldn't give us any info, so I never found out if he survived long term. But that was that was the one time more than a rescue or anything else. I was just like, yeah, doing my job.
Oh,
That's great.
Well, and that was going to be my follow-up. Obviously, got a little bit deeper into it, but if there was one rescue or one moment like that, let's say no one heard about any of the other ones you did, and I know we don't, especially you guys don't like to brag about it, but if there's one rescue that you wouldn't want to forget yourself, right, that you could remember, or one instance, whatever it might be.
I know mine, kind of just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
It was during lifeguard training, and we were doing mock rescue finals. That's where we used to have 3 instructors sitting in chairs, and we'd send them out of the tower. I know they do it a little bit different now. And anyway, it was Debbie Friedman. I know it was Debbie. It might have been just 2. It was Debbie Friedman and me. We were scoring, and there was decent surf. The big thing was there's a big, like at Huntington, always gets that big inshore hole, more of a trough. It just runs the whole length of the beach. Mm-hmm. And so it was literally walk, boom, into 10 feet of water. Yeah. And, we were looking, we were watching it, and I just remember I caught it out of the corner of my eye and I instantly knew something was wrong. And it's just one of those things you just instinct or sixth sense or whatever, and that I think every lifeguard hopefully gets once in their career of going, I don't know what it was, but I turned and the last thing I saw was a hand, going into the trench. Wow. And just running down the beach, jacket, shirt, everything flying off, and not seeing anything, and just going for last point scene, diving in and coming up with this, 3 or 4-year-old girl, and still breathing and all that. And it's just, I know if 10 more seconds I don't see that, she wouldn't have come up, and she would end up down at Huntington City, somewhere down there on their beach, and was able to come up, hand them off to the mom. Like most times, there's no recognition of thank you or anything like that. But that's okay. I got my thank you with the CPR compression. But that was like, just again, one of those few times where it was like, it wasn't because I was doing this, but it wasn't at that point looking. It was more like something wrong in the universe and time to go.
Wow. And that's the thing. How many people saw that transpire or had the awareness of how?
Other than Debbie, nobody else on the beach probably recognized that.
Yeah, and so that's where it all gets lost in translation for lifeguards. These things happen so quickly,
right,
and so subtly sometimes, especially with kids. Right, you drop, they're drowning instantly. It's not an exaggeration. There's videos.
She wasn't coming back up.
Yeah.
And so luckily it was just that, and literally, one hand.
Yeah.
How about you?
Let's see. Well, I got with people, one of the good ones was again at training, and it was a dead flat calm day. I think it was June, and the water was cold. It was like 62, and it was a weekend, so the beach was packed, but nobody was in the water. And so, and I think the whole training that to that point there had been almost no surf. And so we were telling all these stories about, oh yeah, it's hell out there. And so you and I and Stouffer grabbed a couple of the seasonals, and I was riding on the back bumper with the seasonals. And so Denny was driving, and we pulled up at this tower, or between two towers, and we were going, yeah, even on days like this, you got to be really on top of it. And they're kind of going, right. And so we were watching, and there was a guy that walked down to the water's edge about 75 yards away, and he walked down into the water just before the trench, and there was a little finger rip pulling. And so just to set a good example for the rookies, I said, I'm going to go make contact on that guy. And they were just going, oh my God. And so I started running down there, and the guy walked out a little farther, and next thing you know, boom, he's in the trench. And he turns and he can't swim. He can't swim at all. And so I start running a little faster. And then the rip kind of picks him up and starts moving him away from the beach, and he's just friggin' going down, man. And so I'm in a flat sprint, and I get there and I throw my fins up on the beach. I probably took 6 strokes to get to him. Grabbed him. I mean, he would have drowned. And I hate to say this, but the tower the guard that was in the tower closest to that wasn't paying as close of attention as he probably should have. But anyway, I dragged the guy in, and he was all happy, but nobody noticed, except for the guard. And he came out of the tower, and he looked at me, and he was like,
I don't know if it was that one, but I can remember once at lifeguard training, the fastest blur of a lifeguard sprint I've ever seen was from Mike. And it may have been that one, because I just remember I've never seen anybody. You weren't even touching the sand. His ankles were up around his ears. He was going so fast and high stepping into the water. It was just like this.
Yeah.
Boom. Whoa.
That's funny. Yeah, that was back when I could run.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It definitely was.
And kind of we'll start wrapping it up with some simpler questions and stuff, just because we've been, I don't even know what time it is, but we've been chatting for a bit.
They're probably taking a nap.
Yeah.
About 2:12.
Okay. So if you're going forward and you wanted to give just the lifeguards, working today or going into the profession today, some sort of motivation or advice, something along those lines, what would you tell them?
Well, I still try and do a lot of recruiting, especially for the permanent ranks now. But, I think Ed says it best. There's no more noble profession around still. And you're never going to get rich doing it. But the rewards, you can hardly, yes, in other EMS jobs you can get that, but I don't think as much as lifeguarding can you change the course of history and, like I said, families and communities' lives by doing what we do. And the thing is, it's what we teach, especially with the state lifeguards, the preventative stuff, so that they don't they're not getting rescued. They're not having a bad time. So they come back and it becomes part of their life, and they're having a good time. That's the ultimate. But on the other end of it, it's being able to save somebody's life. There's just nothing that can touch it. And believe me, with the state government especially, the ups and downs are brutal sometimes. Economically, the budget cycles really can beat you up. But if you learn, like, especially I think for us, because we went through some of the worst budget cycles in the history of state of California. I mean, it's on a really good roll.
Yeah.
And you learn to just write it even and stuff like that, and not get involved with the highs and lows of it. Career-wise, what's neat about it is you can choose so many paths to go down. For me, it was training. For Mike, it was training and then supervision, dog handling, get into management. I mean, there's so many different career paths. And for parks, one of the big things, what a way when you're young, you go to work a different park every 2 years.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool until all of a sudden you land a spot and go, this is where I want to live. So I don't know. I try and keep it real especially the permanents. It's like, okay, it is a peace officer job, but I can tell you it's a career second to none. I wouldn't have changed anything. All of my lifelong friends are out of guarding. And, like I said, we go to the weddings and funerals and births, and Ed used to put that very, very well to the lifeguard training classes of, how important that was in his life. So.
I would say that young guys coming up, I would say that they're entering a really special profession that is not only special, but it's incredibly important. You're making a huge contribution to your community every day, and an important thing, if you're looking at this job as a long-term deal, you've got to adopt an attitude. So you can go home at night and realize the things you've done. A lot of state employees are always, whining and moaning about this, that, and the other thing. They show up, they put in their 8, they go home. Don't be that guy. Be the guy that's out there doing the right thing, busting your butt every day. Have a vision for what you're doing, and carry it forward. This is. You're not working this career just so you can retire. You're working this career so you can make a contribution to your community, and make a living as well. But you don't want to be that counting the days to retirement guy. If you're doing that, you're in the wrong line of work. And I would say that show up, make a contribution, enjoy yourself as much as you can, and don't be a negative influence on your coworkers. And you'll be happier, and your coworkers will be happier.
Yeah, even to that point, if you put all the effort in as a seasonal, even if that's all you're going to do, and you go on to become a doctor, or a lawyer, a teacher, whatever, guaranteed, if you do it right, those are the best years of your life. Because it's the best years. 18 to 24 of your life. It's the best, you're as far as healthy, top of the world, all that stuff. But then if you put all that effort and positive energy into being a lifeguard, when you get done, no matter what you do, it's the best time of your life. And we've witnessed that every single year when, the guards come back and tell us that. Yep. And that was the most fun I ever had. I think of that all the time.
Yep.
Or we got guys like Jim Bear and coming back for their 45th year of being a seasonal lifeguard. Why are you doing
amazing,
that?
Yeah.
Tom Harmon up in Ventura, 46 years as a seasonal lifeguard.
Wow.
He's a real successful lawyer. What? Best job I ever had.
Yeah.
It's my mental safety time. Brian Ketterer, he's division chief, one of the most stressful jobs in state parks. He, on his time off, he's a seasonal lifeguard, for instance. He is just for his mental health.
Making rescues.
He gets to go out, and he doesn't have to supervise. He just jumps in a tower and makes rescues. And that keeps him healthy mentally to deal with all the other stuff. If you do it right early, it doesn't matter whether you stay in the long run or go do something else. It'll stay with you forever as one of the most positive thing you've ever done in your life. And I don't know, I see that all the time with the guys I've run across. We call them some old lifeguards.
I got a couple just kind of fun ones towards the end. Well, what's the best lifeguard vehicle that you drove in since the 70s to now?
Oh my God!
Which is the best one?
Wow.
My favorite was this vehicle. It was called a Jeep Commander, and it was a 2-seat Jeep with a little pickup bed in the back and a long hood with a straight 6-cylinder engine in it. And that thing was fantastic. It would climb anything. I don't think they made it for too long, but we made a box and put it in the back, and it was comfortable. I mean, if I could find one of those, I would buy it. I really liked that car a lot. That was in the early to mid 70s.
I'll give you 3.
Okay.
I just have to.
Sure.
One is the was it late 60s VW bug that we had at Carlsbad.
The dune buggy.
The dune buggy. Because you would sit like this high, off the sand.
Yeah, a couple feet off the sand.
Yeah, and it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And all that. It also was, it was one of the worst vehicles to ever be in. If you ran over a pile of dog poop, it would go up into the fenders, and then you would breathe that all day long. But that was a cool vehicle. And then the one I remember I started with was like an old military Willys Jeep, and even when I got into it, so it was already how old? I don't know, old. You could see the highway as you were driving down the road. They had no floorboard, or very little of it left. So that was a unique one to try and drive, and the clutch was interesting. And that's back when at South Carlsbad we would drive down the shop. Everybody'd park at the shop, and everybody'd get on it in the morning. So it'd be like 8 guys on the vehicle, and we'd drive and drop them off on each tower. And at the end of the day, you'd drive by and they'd pick you up. And so you had to be like, and this is when it was wood towers, wood shutters. We had these bolts. You took time to shut it down. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't get your tower shut, the vehicle just kept going. Because if they stopped as they got more people on, they couldn't get the dang thing going again. So it kept going the whole way down the road, and sometimes you walked the rest of the way. And the last one was just one of those peak times for us. We went early in our careers. Vehicles never got replaced. I mean, it was like forever to get a new vehicle. And then you might get one. I mean, the fleets they have now is incredible.
Yeah.
So let's not forget you guys were the mechanics too, not just lifeguards.
Right.
Yeah, we used to take them all apart in the wintertime, buff them out, build our towers. That's a good thing that lifeguards did back then, man. All the maintenance, all the painting, all the digging of the phone lines. And
I hated all that.
We exposed ourselves to so much toxic chemicals, taking those vehicles apart and priming them and painting them. We were spraying we'd hang some trash bags around and think that was protecting us. But I can remember one year we didn't have any vehicles, and I don't remember where they got it, but they got a used USPS Postal Service vehicle. It was just a piece of garbage. And I'd be driving in that with my Pope gear on, and people would like look at me and go,
really professional, dude.
You're kind of top of the heap, aren't you?
That's good.
We used to have some vehicles that were in really bad shape.
God,
we used to have to milk them so long.
Yeah,
that was really. That's one thing that's really, really, really improved.
Yep.
Is that the vehicles at least now are getting replaced, and they look professional. And they're safe.
Yeah.
Ours weren't. We would drive most of our vehicles. If you got going over 45 on the highway,
that's right.
You just start shimmying and just like, oh my.
Yeah, we had International Harvester Scouts.
Scouts, yeah.
Mostly Jeeps, though. We had a lot of Jeeps.
A lot of Jeeps.
Mm-hmm. What about your favorite beach in California, and why?
Now?
Yeah.
Or back then?
Well, we could do a before and after. I guess because they have changed a lot, some of them.
The beaches have changed. That's one of the biggest changes in the last 40 years is sand and beach structure. I don't know. I probably just because I spent more time there, but South Carlsbad and Pono were pretty cool. That was my favorite campground. It used to be such a beautiful, nice sandy beach. Awesome diving, good surfing. Pono was never even used. I mean, that was like a nothing beach. Mm-hmm. Now my favorite beach is not going to the beach. Hiding, staying out of the sun.
My favorite is just for recreational purposes, and I haven't been there for a long time, but I love going to Salt Point every year and diving for abs, and you just feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, which you are, I mean, camping there was heaven. It's the most beautiful stretch of coast anywhere. You know, the ocean is just alive with, you know, fish and all kinds of stuff. And so I made a trip there every year for, 15 years probably. But my favorite beach is San Clemente State Beach, where I worked for all those years. There's 3 or 4 good surf breaks there, and it's just a really nice little beach. It doesn't get as windy as Huntington. It picks up the south swells. The water is always, it's always amongst the warmest in the county, if not the warmest. So that's my favorite. I go down there every single day still, just to, if nothing else, just to look at it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there a point where the red shorts get too short?
Yeah, and I think with the girls we're there.
Yeah. Well, that's tough from our generation because we wore Hindwells.
Yeah. Yeah, now they're wearing the things that are,
past your knees. Yeah.
They're completely. I would argue that they can get too long.
Okay.
Yeah, the girl suits are, I mean, I know it's the fashion, and what are you going to say? The last year I worked as a lifeguard chief, I fielded a complaint from one of the administrative employees. I took her on a ride along down on the beach, and she saw the junior guard. One of the junior guard women was prancing around in one of those, G-string kind of things, and she was just incensed. She's like, you've got to do something about this, and and I said, yeah, but I was thinking, I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole, man.
Reminds me of the time we had that dancer show up at lifeguard training.
Oh.
She had like this buckskin bikini on that was, well, she was a dancer in her spare time, so there wasn't much, and we
showed up for lifeguard training.
For lifeguard training with like almost nothing on. It was like
I mean, it was kind of fun, but
but you can't do that here. A different conversation at the time. That's been one of the side note that didn't really come up, but biggest change in our lifetime. When we started, there were no female lifeguards.
That's right.
And it wasn't until the mid 70s that we finally, started getting.
And when did you guys get your first female guard?
I think the first female lifeguard for the state of California was Kim.
Kim. Kim Berg.
Berg, yeah.
But I don't remember her maiden name.
Yeah, I'm forgetting her maiden name, but Kim Berg down to San Diego Coast, North Sector. And wow, she went through a lot because it was like anything, I mean, not readily received by some guards.
Sure.
Not readily received by a lot of guards, and took a lot of abuse. But and then we got a few more, and that, especially doing training and stuff. But I got to see, the evolution of more and more women coming in and realizing that these are the strong lifeguards. These are the mentally tough lifeguards.
Yeah.
You look at every requal from over the years, water could be 50 degrees. All the men, when they got to wear wetsuits, were all wetsuited up. Women, no wetsuits. They just, probably that was a long time coming and a great positive change for lifeguarding.
Absolutely.
Was getting female lifeguards in who turned out to be absolutely some of the best, strongest lifeguards we ever had.
Especially when they were young, they paid a lot closer attention to what was going on in their areas than did the 16 or 17-year-old boys.
Our problem is we weren't able to keep them as long because they were way smarter than the guys. and there were better things to do. Okay, I got my lifeguard time in. Now I'm going to go on to be a nurse or a doctor or a lawyer and any other walk of life and everything. But really a neat change to see. The lifeguard profession go through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's because even in the right in the first start of when lifeguard services were getting implemented and everything, I don't even think that there probably isn't even on record females that were working at that time, but forgive me if I'm mistaking that, but I feel
LA City had one in the...
Very rare.
Yeah, in the 60s.
Generally male-dominated.
Yeah.
But almost a stereotype within our stereotype.
Yeah, well, they even used to have, they had heights limitations
Height
for some
and
of the
weight, yeah.
agencies. And so there was a lot of things that kept them from being in. But it was all, I think, by design at the time, was we don't want female lifeguards. And
5'8", 150 pounds you had to be.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But like I said, it was such so neat to see that development, and and then the junior guards helped even accelerate that more. We got more out of the junior guard program that went on to be really strong 1s and 2s, and into the junior guard program, and fed itself there. It was pretty cool.
Absolutely, and that's a whole nother conversation of women in lifeguarding, and same with the project too. Just a whole other thing, because that you've got the whole Pamela Anderson Baywatch slow motion image, same thing, and not to mention just when you have a cute girl sitting in the tower too, just the public going up, and as far as, let's not even touch the subject of like sexual harassment, all that stuff from the public, and the stuff that they're taking extra within being in a male dominated thing with a bunch of type A men that are running around and working out and competing against each other and all that stuff. So
because you're talking about prime time, age wise, crazy for all the hormonally, physically fit wise, dynamic, A personalities, men and women. It's like, wow, crazy. But it sure was dynamic, really dynamic when that started coming on.
Yeah.
What was and just briefly, but what was the consensus from those people that you said that weren't open to it at the beginning? What was their problem with women coming into the profession?
I think it was kind of societal at that time. I mean, there were a lot of professions where women weren't readily accepted in any of the EMS or fire or police, certainly more than lifeguarding. But I think just that, guys that felt they weren't going to be strong enough, fast enough.
Right.
Especially if they looked at
that was the bottom
we had some
line.
smaller stature women. I can remember at training we'd go, "There's no way," but then they'd hit the water. Holy moly! They could swim with anybody. They could pull any weight. And so I think that was probably the biggest concern from a lot of old timers, was like they're not strong enough to do the job.
Yeah.
There was a lifeguard supervisor at a particular place that I won't mention that was so upset about having to hire women, that he took all the ladders off the towers, thinking that they wouldn't be able to pull themselves up into the towers. Jeez. And that didn't work. So
we were lucky because the first 4 women we had, when we heard we were going to get some women, we had the usual, they're not strong enough, they're not fast enough, blah, blah, blah. But the 4 women that came to work with us were studs, and they beat the butts of the guys. Like we'd do these long swims, they'd beat all of our butts. And they were very attentive. They were easy to get along with. They weren't easily upset by the locker room hijinks and all that. So we got lucky, and it didn't take long at all for everybody to go, okay, this is going to work.
Oh, they handled the locker room and gutter talk so good. They were so strong. I'll never forget the year Patty Mackle did a requal swim, like 8 months pregnant, and just whooped everybody. And that was when a competitive era, when the guys were strong and everything.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And that's why your kids are lifeguards now. They were doing the requal before everything.
She's still beating people up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she's always been a fast swimmer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's good that it's changed for that, because like there's days where I'll work the beach, and I've had days where down in San Diego where it's all females in the tower in the unit.
Yeah,
with me, and I'm cool. I get intimidated because I'm going, oh man, I better
San Diego North especially seemed to be a popular place. It got to be known as a good place for women to work.
Yeah,
once we got through the first couple of obstacle years or whatever you want to call it, we have always done really well in the North sector for strong women, female lifeguards.
Yep.
Good role models and great attitudes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, I did want you to just touch on, obviously, Mike's written 2 books on lifeguarding, and if you want to just explain real briefly
Sure.
The 2 books and kind of what they go into, and then as well as where people that are listening or watching can find them and buy them.
Yeah, this book, Warm Winds and Following Seas, it was published in 2018, and I probably spent 4 years writing it. And it's mostly it's biographical, but it's mostly historical, and I like to think it's an interesting read. There's a lot of good rescue stories in it, and stories about rescue boats, etc. This book I just published in February 2022, Neptune Wept. And it's a really personal story about things that I encountered and struggles that I had to overcome to adapt to the job of being a lifeguard. And I really dug deep on this one. But so this is a new book, and it's out on Amazon as we speak. So
both of them on Amazon.
Yes.
Both must reads if you're a lifeguard.
Yeah.
2 completely different books. Both really good reads, and both, like, I probably read this in 3 days. I probably read this in 2 days. I mean, once you pick it up, you just start going, and I think a must read for anybody that's in lifeguarding, because it gives you a great insight to what lifeguarding really is.
Yeah.
And then the effects it has on you. I mean, it's a 1-2 punch.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the stuff we touched on today as well, but definitely more in depth, and I enjoyed reading those as well. I think we're done unless you guys have anything else that you want to add or mention, or something we left out that you'd want to touch on.
I appreciate the time and getting to share some history, and hopefully pass on the passion for lifeguarding. That's the beauty of it, that we're still sitting here with obviously a passion for the job and what it meant to us and our lives and our families and our loved ones. And
the job crawls into your soul like you can't believe, man. It's just, I still dream at night about all this stuff, regularly. So, and I've been retired for quite some time. So it's a good way to make a living.
Yeah, it's a good way to go through life.
That's right.
It's a good life job.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for taking some time to sit here with me. I'm honored to be able to be the one in the room to be hanging out. So
that's great. Thanks for setting it up.
And then, Mike, if you won't mind, let me hand you this real quick.
Oh, that's right. I got to leave this here.
And for those that don't know, in true state lifeguard fashion, Mestri is the proponent of one of our probably most, I would say, if not the most used phrase
or overused,
but you'll hear it ringing out through neighborhoods and parties. And if you're in Huntington, between anywhere in the vicinity between the months of May and June when running our training, at some point through the palms and in the sand, it will reverberate.
And for some of the past life and current lifeguards, their worst nightmares.
Yes. And everyone listening, be careful, because this will trigger some of those things we talked about, past memories. But Mike, if you wouldn't mind just doing us the favor of one solid
we have just one quick little saying that we save the adult, save the child, but most of all, save the baby!
There we go. And I think we'll end on that. Thanks.